All right, it's 6 o'clock. We'll go ahead and bring our regular board meeting to order. Welcome everybody that's here visiting. We got a great group here today. That's fun to see. Start off with a roll call. Roger here.
Eddie here.
Sarah here. Cindy here.
All right. Now we'll stand in for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, well, we will review the I-35 mission statement and district priorities. The mission statement of Interstate 35 is, the Interstate 35 School District exists to develop lifelong learners and responsible, productive, successful citizens in an ever-changing society. The district priorities are articulate and support a cohesive, student-centered PK through 12 vision for continuous school improvement, engage in effective teaching and relevant learning for the 21st century, and operate with fiscal integrity, efficiency, and effectiveness. The board members should have a copy of the agenda. I would entertain any questions or any motions for it.
Move to approve the agenda.
I'd second that.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We will now start the public hearing on the recommended changes for the 2021 school calendar year. Sharon, you got introductory remarks for this?
I do, yeah. So, if you remember, and I hope this is the last one, if you remember back in January, the governor recommended recommended law that was enacted that all schools give parents the choice of a 100% in-person learning option. When that happened, districts were given guidance on what that looks like based on if they were completely remote or hybrid or if they were already in person. So we were obviously already in person. The challenge is that when that law was enacted, which is February 15th was the start date, so just this last week, you have to, if you think of it almost like prorating, you have to look at from that date through the end of the year, well, you have either met your 180 days or the 10,080 hours that are required by Iowa code. So we had chosen to do 180 days because we didn't know what the calendar was going to look like. We didn't know if we'd have to be gone for 2 weeks. I know some schools let out for a couple of days around Thanksgiving. So we just knew if we were going to take days, we wanted to give days back at the end of the year or have the remote learning option for those days. So we went with 180 days. We are well over the number of hours that we need in any given year. But to be completely compliant with the legislation that was just passed, so we're at 1,132 hours, 32.5. But to be completely compliant to the 100% in-person learning option, I'm making the recommendation that our last 2 professional development days, which would be March 12th and April 2nd, be days off for kids, not to do remote learning. So they just have that day off. Our teachers still come in and do their professional development. We're still at the required number of hours. We're well over that. But if you even look at the prorated structure of that, we're within the guidelines of what the state has provided. So because we aren't having students come in on those days, we were going to do remote learning like we have the past PD days that we've had. I don't feel like that's in complete compliance with what the 100% in-person learning option is. So because we meet the other requirements, we don't have to be in school those days for kids in the remote learning option. So those would be PD days for teachers, no school days for students. and we would still be in compliance, and I think it's actually probably more in line with what the governor is recommending as far as 100% in-person option. So that's my recommendation for the calendar change. Those 2 days, March 12th and April 2nd, still professional development days for teachers, but not a remote learning day for students.
So now's the time for public question and answer. If anybody is here to comment or ask questions. Everybody's here to see kids. All right. No questions. We will go ahead and close the public hearing on the 2020-2021 school calendar. Now we have the open forum. Open forum allows for residents, students, parents, guardians, and staff members of the district may address the board about relevant topics. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers' participation is limited to 5 minutes per meeting. We ask speakers to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees or students or their performance. Do we have anybody sign up? Nobody signed up? All right. Now it's time for the highlight of the night, which is the Education Spotlight.
So we have our first grade teaching team and some first grade students here to show us some of the work they've been doing and maybe try and stump us. They didn't know that part.
Test?
Test you guys.
No.
That's right. Hi, guys.
Okay, so we have a group of first graders here who have just finished their bird research projects. So they can use adjectives to describe body parts of birds and how different species of birds use their body parts to survive. They have picked a bird species of their choosing, and they've done research on it to become an expert, so we're calling them bird experts now on their chosen bird. They've written a riddle that they're going to read for you tonight and see if you can guess their bird. And they had to do we learned how to do a new kind of drawing, which is not a drawing from our imagination, but what do we call this kind of drawing? Do you guys remember?
Realistic.
A realistic and scientific drawing of their expert bird. So, and we also learned a lot of habits of character as we were working on our projects. We had to show a lot of, what is it called? Perseverance. Yes. So we'll let some of them read them for you tonight.
So do you want to introduce everyone?
Yes.
Mrs. Truman?
So here we have Brantley Brown. This is Evan Blair, and then do you want to introduce
Aiden Brockett, Wyatt Monroe, and Riley Buckland.
And Lila Truman and Gabe Maxwell.
All right, so
Okay, let's go first.
anyone want to go first? Oh, Riley. Okay, Riley's going to read with the big voice, read your riddle, okay?
This bird has wet wings and fast wings. He uses his wings to swim. This bird has a fantastic beak. It helps to get food. What kind of bird is it?
I've got an idea.
What?
Is it a penguin?
Correct.
Oh, good job.
Very good.
Good job, Riley.
Yeah.
All of the first graders obviously have done this project, but we knew we probably didn't have time tonight for all of them to read to you. So these are just a select few, but all of the kids worked very hard on their projects.
Wyett did stump Miss Stentlinger with his
Yes, he
earlier.
did.
So we'll see if he
Wyatt.
can stump anyone else.
He
Wanna read
stumped
yours?
you earlier?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
boy.
This bird has a big beak to store up lots of trying to catch fish, and then traps the fish in his beak. This bird has webbed feet that help it walk in water.
So it traps fish in its beak.
It has webbed feet to walk in water.
I'm gonna say a seagull.
I got it.
Or
Oh, go ahead. I'm ready.
the pelican? Oh, that was my guess.
Oh.
Any other guesses?
I think you got them.
Okay, you want to share it?
It was a spoonbill.
Spoonbill.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
nice. Good job.
This bird has a strong beak. He gets fish and other foods. This bird has fast wings so that it can get food. This bird has fast feet to get food.
That's a tough
I'll take a guess at it. Is it a roadrunner?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I had it. My bad.
All right, what is it? You want to share what it is?
A pelican.
Oh,
There you go. We're one.
Yeah.
Good job.
Heather, are you ready? Okay.
This bird has a hard beak. This bird uses their claws to help them survive. Their beaks help them get food. Their beaks are strong. Their beaks help to find food. Its beak helps in the tree. Its feet its babies. Their beaks and claws help them survive.
A bird with a really strong beak.
Brown?
Would it be a woodpecker?
Oh, nice job, Sarah.
Good job, Eddie.
That
Wow.
was very descriptive.
Yeah.
Brantley, are you ready? Go ahead, buddy.
This bird has blue soft fluffy feathers to help it stay warm. It has a tiny small beak to grab acorns.
Grab acorns.
I don't know.
And fluffy feathers to keep it warm? Is that what you said?
Did you say it was blue? Blue fluffy feathers? Oh, man. Is it in Iowa? It wouldn't be in Iowa. I bet not. It is? Oh, man.
I was going to guess a peacock. No?
All right, Brantley, what is it?
A blue jay.
It is a blue jay. I didn't know they ate acorns.
No.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good job.
All right, go ahead, Gabe.
This bird has red feet to walk through. This bird has a nice beak because it has a string and it is thin. The feet feathers. Oh, all pink for eating chips. What is it?
Others are pink from eating shrimp.
Webbed feet and a beak with a strainer.
Oh, a strainer. I'm gonna guess a flamingo.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Go here, flamingo.
Let's see your picture. Oh,
There you
very good.
go.
All right, and Miss Lila, your last one.
This bird has a special elbows and shoulders to move in different directions. This bird has a special beak to peck with its long beak. What bird is this?
Special elbows and shoulders, and a special beak to peck with.
How about a
Maybe an ostrich? I don't know.
hummingbird? Hummingbird?
Hummingbird.
Oh.
Because they move fast, yeah.
And also, just to note, before we finish, a couple of these kiddos were in quarantine and actually virtual learning on this project from home. So, Evan and Gabe. Yep, so this kind of shows trying to parallel the virtual learning from the in-person learning. So a couple of them did theirs at home.
Yeah.
guys have any questions for our first grade Riddlers?
Oh, of course.
Any questions?
Since spring is coming, you're going to see some of these birds, right? We're going to see a woodpecker. They're the ones with the red heads. The males have red heads, right?
They live in my
some of the
backyard if you
woodpeckers
need
do. And then the blue jays, we're going to see blue jays. And what else?
The hummingbirds, if you can catch them.
Yeah, hummingbirds, right? Some people put out
You
feeders.
see mine at the zoo.
Yeah.
And flamingos at
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
We go to the zoo, so we get to go there.
You guys get to visit the zoo even.
Oh, that's great.
Later.
So this summer, if you see your bird, will you be able to identify it and say, that's my bird?
You're gonna recognize your bird if you see it?
You think you'll recognize your flamingo if you see it?
Maybe.
Our next module is learning, we're just getting into it, but it's learning how to be bird helpers and bird advocates and how to care for birds. So we're kind of, that's where we're going next. So hopefully by this summer, they'll know, they really will be experts. So, yeah.
Great.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you.
Good job. And you guys don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting.
No.
But you can.
Yeah, of course, you can.
Wait, did we?
Yeah.
Not you, whichever one gets it first.
Here, do you want to come on? I'll do a picture with you and Dave. So we did a picture of all.
I'm gonna let them clear out just a little bit for the noise.
The nice thing about that is that's all part of that curriculum that we adopted last year. And so what it is it's they do a module, which they have 3 or 4 in any given year. And then each module has different units in it. So this is one of the units, and it incorporated science, writing, communication, speaking, some art things. So the nice thing is it's really cross-curricular. So even though we probably don't typically learn about words, it's one of those things that, kind of incorporates, and it's high interest, so.
But you could see very quickly how you could replace bird with another, like,
Right.
chair. You know, do a research project on a chair.
Right.
Okay, then you just boom, boom, boom.
Right.
So that's neat.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, well, we'll move on to the next item, which is the student representative report.
Yes,
I
and
noticed-
Will is not here today, so I have his report.
Great.
And let's see if I can find it. He said Music Madness is coming. I don't know if you've heard about this, but the Student Council is sponsoring Music Madness during, for a week. And you pay $1 to hear a song over the intercom, and then you pay $1 to get the song to stop playing.
Oh, my.
So I think it'll be a good time for all. They're going to do it during advisory. I think it's the first week in March, but I don't know for sure. But Music Madness is coming, so that'll be
That's cool.
exciting. They also have a blood drive scheduled for next month, and I know our kids always look forward to that. They're getting ready to finish the school year strong. It is hard to believe we have about 3 months of school left, which for me this year is phenomenal. And the students are being understanding. We've had a lot of changes, and I think that's kind of a constant theme. And I know I'm very appreciative of that. I know that the administrators are, because there's always some nuances changing depending on guidance. And hopefully we'll be able to start to pull some of that back as we get, groups vaccinated and we get more guidance from the CDC and public health and the governor's office. So exciting time right now. Sports wrapped up for the winter season. We had quite a showing at the wrestling tournament, so that was fun to see. And I know our Lexi, our track coach, is excited about getting the kids out and getting into conditioning for that. So transition from one season to the next.
All right. So that's the student representative report. Now we're on to the principal reports. Do you have
I
them
have
for both of
Mr.
them?
Tessaw's, and I think Heather is going to share some of the things from the secondary, so she'll
Okay.
cover kind of both. Mr. Tessaw says it's hard to believe we are almost done with February, but here we are. We are glad to be past the extreme cold, knock on wood, and teachers are glad to be able to go back outside for recess, and I know students are. Hopefully this warmer weather is here to stay and spring won't be far behind. Spring conferences are right around the corner. We're going to plan those the same we did in the fall. They can be held remotely or virtually, or they can be in person if that's a request by the parents. Anytime parents are in the building for those things, that they do have to follow the guidelines for social distancing and wearing masks. As a parent, he said, I always appreciate conference time as a way to see what my kids are up to in the classroom and have a chance to hear the teachers' stories. We are also planning to hold the book fair again in the gym like we did in the fall. The book fair is an amazing fundraiser for our library, and to be able to still hold it while following the guidelines means more resources for our students. So if you can get over, I know that they had some additional hours for parents, so if you couldn't come on conference night, but you could come one of the other nights, they were here. PBIS, usually at this time of year, our PBIS committee will hold expectation stations where they do some of the reteaching of the expectations. They did those virtually this year and had the videos for the classes. So they're on the school YouTube channel if you'd like to see those. We did have some Valentine's Day parties. So classrooms parties have been something that we've been able to continue to do that provide a sense of normal. And we just held the final one of the year for Valentine's Day. Schoology with the additional remote days that we have had for weather, the admin team has taken a closer look at our Schoology courses and how user-friendly they are. As a result, we have created some guidelines for teachers to help organize their courses. And the expectations for elementary teachers were they needed to be easy to navigate, and it breaks down what that looks like. And I think Mrs. Dutcher is going to talk a little bit about that at the high school and middle school level as well. Assignments needing to be clearly labeled. Anticipate or have synchronous learning if possible, meaning have the class being recorded while the teacher's teaching it. Or have any new instruction be video. So if you talk to our first grade teachers, every day their lesson that they teach is recorded. So the kids at home see the exact same lesson that they see in the classroom. So moving towards that, either with a teacher recording what they're teaching and posting it a day late, or putting it up early. But the new learning should be corresponding with a video or recording of that teaching. Because
I'm sorry. So is that something new that a lot of the teachers have been trying now?
some teachers have done it from the beginning, but some teachers are now, it's now an expectation that if you're having that new learning, because I think that was a struggle for some of our parents, is they didn't know how to teach it. You know, it wasn't something that they maybe either remembered, or maybe they didn't teach math the same way, and so there was just, I think, a little concern about not having that information. So some of our teachers use videos that are already published, you know, so like some of our math teachers will have a video up of how to do polynomials. But it doesn't have to be necessarily them recording, but there has to be some direct instruction by a teacher. And so the concern was when students would get the assignments and there was no instruction, people were just lost. So we have the expectation to kind of clean up the structure of the folders so that they're a little bit more streamlined, but then also if there's new teaching to have that video component. I know our coaches have been working with teachers and what that looks like. So I don't know if we're 100% there yet. I know Heather's going to talk a little bit about that as well in her report. But we are seeing teachers do a little bit more with the synchronous learning for our remote learners that are remote all the time, but also having things recorded for days when we might not be in school, and mainly because of weather. And that's Mr. Tessa's report.
Is there a like a feedback type of box or something within Schoology that so that parents who are, especially with the elementary, who are helping their kids at home, you know, as they're doing it or when they're done, thinking, oh gosh, you know, this would be something good that I can mention to the teacher on a way of improving as they're thinking about it, not something that, you know, days later I'm going to call the school or teacher.
We just encourage them to use the email the teachers directly.
Okay.
I don't know if there's, you can email through Schoology, but I don't know if there's like a comments box. I don't think public has access to it. because I know we can turn it off for kids.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's accessible to parents, but we just encourage to email the teachers.
I would mention that the new app makes it really easy to email any of our teachers too, because it's really just like 2
Right.
clicks away on that, which is a lot nicer than what it was previously, in case anybody needs to use that. So. All right, we'll move on to Mr. Casters.
And Mrs. Dutry.
Mrs.
I'll
Dutry.
start with the middle school. In the middle school, we did get some new supplies and activities for kids to use during open campus. So our kids like this morning were able to play chess and checkers and paint. There's also some cards, so they were doing some different games and using math and counting, some string art. So instead of just playing some of the games on their computer that they sometimes are enticed by, there's some new activities for them to do during that time. So it was really promising to see how many kids would prefer to do those things instead of play some of the games on their computers. And then they're getting that social time with some of their classmates. But a lot of the activities also are, creative thinking type things. So it's really great to see them using those. Our middle school team is still working on our literacy that I've kind of talked about a couple times. So actually just last Friday we compared our first set of data and our second set of data just to kind of get an idea of kind of where we were. Our data coach, Heather Wells, she went through a notice and wonder protocol with us to kind of get an idea of, what changes we noticed and why, which students were making progress and which weren't, and what we could do about that. Then each teacher individually made an implementation commitment. So what they're going to do for the next 4 weeks with the literacy work that we're doing, what they can commit to doing in their classrooms. And I also asked them to share with me when they'll be using either one of the strategies that we've been working on. So again, we've been working on sentence expansion and reciprocal teaching. And so along with their commitments, I also asked them to let me know when they'll be using one of those in their classroom so that I can be a part of it and give them some feedback, just kind of see how things are going in the classroom with actual implementation. In terms of the secondary as a whole, Stephanie Brown, our K-12 ELP and TAG coordinator, she has been starting a lot of conversations just recently about planning for our acceleration plans. So our students in math and ELA who are accelerated, what does that look like? How do we accelerate them? Especially the last couple of years in math, we've worked really hard to not just have kids skip a grade, but rather take that learning during the summer so that they're not just jumping over it, but they're finding a way to include it, but still excel our kids if they're ready to do that. With ELA, it's a little different. They've been trying to compact years, do 2 years in one, do some different things like that. So she's started some conversations with our math and our ELA team to figure out what does that look like moving forward, what's working, what's not. So great to see that kind of planning starting to take place already. Also, Steve wanted to mention that due to some of the early retirements, we've already started some of the hiring. The hiring season is upon us already. He made a point that he's really excited about a lot of the applicants we're receiving are strong applicants. It's early in the year, so we're getting more applicants, I think, even than he was expecting for some of the positions. So it's great to think about some of those future road runners and what they'll bring to our district. In regards to the Schoology evolution or remote learning changes, did Steve share the Google Doc with you at all?
I think he shared it with me.
So he put together a list of basically since August 20th, what kind of have we done. I can kind of go through the basics and then maybe even if at a later time you can share the Google Doc if you have specific questions. But at the beginning of the year, of course, we set expectations, but those have changed due to feedback from staff, teachers, students, parents. Mrs. Cordick did send out a remote learning feedback survey on January 24th, and it included both remote learners and people who had been quarantined. So those surveys went out, and when we got some of that information back, Steve and I also went through all of the virtual learning day information that teachers had posted, and did kind of like a walkthrough, but it was a digital walkthrough. So instead of being in their classroom and seeing something happen, we got on each teacher's Schoology page to see, you know, did they give instructions? Did they have something for the students to do? Was there independent work? What was out there? So we gathered that data all together and then made some changes after that. Specifically, Sharon kind of talked already about, there was, I would say, multiple ways of organizing Schoology, which as a teacher, when you have it organized your way, it feels like it makes sense, and it does. But thinking about our students who see multiple teachers throughout the day, and then each teacher has it organized differently. So we did come to a consensus on how the organization will be in every class. We also expect that every folder has a date, so that if you're gone on February 22nd, it's easy to find what you need for February 22nd because the date is included. We also talked about the expectation of anytime there's new learning or new instruction that takes place, it's not just written explanation, but it is, like Sharon talked about, it's the video, the instruction piece. And that could be something that you video outside of class, so during the 8 to 9 time during open campus in the morning, or on Friday afternoon, or on the weekend. I'm sure there's video that's happening. Or it could also be a case where you video during the class what's happening as it's happening live, and then you post it to Schoology. So there are some options there for teachers, but we do expect that if there's new learning or new instruction taking place, that there's a video associated with that learning. So yeah, dates on everything was another big one, because that was something a lot of parents especially were having a hard time with. Is our students and our teachers maybe knew, like, we're in Unit 3, but if there's Unit 1 through 5 posted on Schoology, as a parent, it's really hard for me to help my kid if I haven't been in class with them. I don't know what Unit 3 or 5 means. So really being specific about including dates on there. That's kind of the main points, I think, of the remote learning changes. Do you guys have any questions about those or anything else?
Is there any changes to the remote learning that you're still working on, still trying to implement? It sounds like you've tried to tackle a decent amount of it. A lot of what you've explained is organizational changes. Is there anything in the actual instruction or feedback in the instruction where you're trying something and you're struggling with anything that you're still trying to work through?
Sure, I think part of that is the instructional videos. I think we're getting a lot closer to having everyone doing that for all of their new teaching. But there's still some, read this out of the textbook or other ways of getting that information. And so that's something we're, I think, continually getting better at and encouraging teachers to do more of. Especially when at first it wasn't it wasn't an expectation to have a video. It was encouraged, but now it is an expectation. So we're seeing that coming through much more now. I think all year it's been a trial basis about what's going to engage kids remotely or online, and how do we meet them kind of where they are and keep moving forward, because it is a lot different teaching to students who aren't in the classroom with you, and it's even more different teaching to some kids that are and some kids that aren't. So I think teachers definitely are in different places with that, but they're working towards getting better every day.
I think the challenge is that there's a perception that if you are remote learning, it's going to be just like they're in the classroom, and it's not. It can't be. You don't get all the social interactions. You don't get all the extra nuances. The teacher can't see if you have a puzzled look. There are so many things that go into actually being in the classroom, and so I think that's one of the things that we've tried to really talk about is it doesn't have to be, the content has to be the same, but the approach might not be the same in every case. Now, some teachers are just saying, can we record and cut part of our lesson? And yes, of course you can. But I think that there's kind of this perception, and I think it's really across the country, that when we talk about remote learning, that it's going to be just, I'm at home, but I'm doing everything that I would do in a normal day, and it's not that. And so I think that learning curve is taking us a while to get to, for not only our teachers and our students, but our parents and our community. I know that we've talked about what does it look like for next year. The DE, or I'm sorry, the AEA had sent out a survey, are we going to do remote learning next year? And I quite frankly told them I'm not sure. We can't do what we've done, right? I mean, I think we've done a great job this year. Obviously, lots to work on still, but I think given our time frame, when you look at the list of the things we've done since August 24th, I mean, it's just night and day difference. So that to me is encouraging. But I don't think it's a reasonable expectation to continue to do how we're doing it, because we need kids back with teachers more frequently, and we can't keep taking teachers' times. But they are allowing things like using an approved provider. So Edgenuity is our provider for credit recovery. So we could have a teacher that organizes that and monitors remote learning, primarily for 5th through 12th grade in a structure like that. Would that be a benefit for some of our kids? I think so. I think some of our kids are excelling in remote learning. Is it something that I would say is across the board for everyone? Not unless we have another shutdown. You know, I mean, like there are some things that I just wouldn't recommend. So I think that as we get through this year, and I speak highly of the teachers because, like I said, I think they've done a phenomenal job. But our understanding of what remote learning is, I think, is evolving, even as a society, what that means. Like your work has probably evolved, you know, since the first day you went home to what it is now when you're at home. I think that that's just kind of a part of the process. So I think that as we look at next year, that'll have to be part of the consideration. And there are some schools that are going to be online schools as a result of this. They're going to have that as an option, so people can open enroll for an online learning program. If we do a remote learning option, then we have to make that an option available to anybody who wants to be a part of it, regardless of where they live in the state of Iowa. So we have to take that into consideration. Not that I think that that's a bad thing, but if we get 200 people, it could be, because we might have to then think about staffing and again, so lots that goes with that. That's not just in reaction to the pandemic, but more planned for a thoughtful approach to educating kids who want to learn remotely. So those conversations are happening already, not only at the state level, but in the district. And so we'll continue to evaluate that. And I just got guidance, about 8 pages worth of guidance about what those expectations are beyond this year. And so we'll
Expectations for remote learning?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. So we'll come with a recommendation to the board about what we want to do, and I would say beyond next year, because I think if it's a solid program and you can build and strengthen it, then that's where you want to be. So
I see so many parallels between work from home, and remote school and in school. And you try to keep the culture. It's impossible to just keep the same culture because now everybody's spread out. And so I do have to commend you and the teachers for having that individual experience. So the remote experience is the same as in the classroom, so they can go in and out. I know it's been a big stressor on it, but it keeps the culture of I-35. The big concern I have, though, is when I see, 70 some kids still remote, and then I see, as I'm watching the wrestling championships on TV, they were pumping that Des Moines school, that Des Moines online school.
Yep.
I'll bet they had 50% of the, and so when they're devoting that much resources to marketing, there's a chance that if we don't offer remote learning, those 70 kids, half of them go to Des Moines up into that virtual school, and we're out.
or one of the other 20 virtual schools that's opened in
20
the state.
or 30 or whatever.
Mhm.
And so I just see that this is becoming a business, and people are going to start a business, and they're going to just take these students,
Right.
remote.
Right, and I
Yeah,
think when we, I
No, it's
apologize, one of the things that we talked about when we did the Return to Learn plan, and I think Heather can talk to this as well, is the thing that makes I-35 great are the teachers, are the students, it's the culture of
It's
the
the
building.
culture,
It's
yeah,
the
right.
piece it's the connection, it's the relationship that kids have with their peers and with their teachers. It's knowing who Eddie Benami is and knowing how he learns, and those are the things that make it. Those are the things that make a school, someplace that people want to be. So
I agree.
our challenge and really probably from the get-go was, how do we keep that relationship piece in the remote learning? And that's why we have liaisons contacting home and talking and making sure and doing check-ins. That's why we have our first grade team knows every other first grade student, because they're all teaching them all, so that they can build that relationship. Oh, that's Mrs. Crozier, or Miss Crozier, or that's Mrs. Truman, you know? And so I think that if we go down that road, which I'm not opposed to looking at, because I do think it's in our world, and I think it's going to be in our world forever, how do we build in that relationship piece or that culture piece so that it is not just somebody, you know, giving me something online that I could get at Des Moines Public or, you know, Ames or wherever there's an opening.
You've just summarized the whole, like, any company that distributes products, right? You're commoditized me now.
Yep.
I am nothing more than a commodity, and if I want a black pen, I can get a black pen here. Well, I'm just going to go to an online marketplace and shop them, right? So businesses have the same exact, you know, problems, and I think as long as we can try to differentiate a little bit, it's in our best interest, but it's going to be tough.
As a district, we got to decide what we want to be really good at. Do we want to deliver the best in-person learning we possibly can and realize that somebody else might do remote learning better than us?
Yeah.
Or do we want to tackle remote learning really well and do those two things side by side?
Right.
Or are we going to be required to do both? I hope not.
Yeah, and we've not been given any word, just so everybody
Yeah.
knows, we've not been given any guidance as to whether or not we're required to offer that remote option.
Right. You know, and I think that's the decision the district has to make, is what do we want to be the best at? Because we cannot, right now we're required to be everything to everybody.
Right.
Everybody in our district we have to be everything to. We aren't going to be successful continuing to try to be.
Not in our current structure.
Correct.
Correct. Correct.
We're deluding ourselves far
Yep,
too much.
absolutely.
Right. Which is I think that what we've known since
we have
the
to.
beginning of this school year. And we
Right.
knew it was going to happen,
Mhm.
but we've talked about the size. I mean, if we open an online school, then we hire an online staff. I mean, you have to have so many people that are going to make it manageable that you're dedicating a staff just to that, which I think it was one of your suggestions at the meeting last. I mean, that's exactly what we would have to be committed to, if that's where we're going to be, because that's what you need to do. Because like Roger said, it needs to be quality.
Think of all the financial implications we had just opening the daycare.
Yeah.
And you're multiplying it, because you're doubling your staff,
Yeah.
and you're not sure how many kids are going to come, and yeah, there's going to have to be guidance from the state. Otherwise, there's going to be it's going to be a free for all.
Yeah.
And I hope the state doesn't make us remote, like you said, do both, because then it's just it's so hard to administer.
And do we really want to be in the competition business of
Yeah.
remote learning?
Right.
Do we want to be competing against
Well, and I
however
think
many
that's-
other school
I
districts
know,
there are
and, you
in
know,
the state of Iowa?
I think the challenge is that the proposed legislation with open enrollment and, you know, some of those things with vouchers, that's what they're forcing, is that competition between private and public, and whether you agree or not, you know, I do think that that's going to be, if that continues to move through the House is where it is now, past the Senate, I think that becomes a challenge. So. And that's all students. That's not just remote students.
No.
That's all students, in-person students, remote students,
And you're going to have
homeschooled students.
You're going to have districts just go out of business, right? Because they don't offer a quality product, and then gone. Which is, I mean, I guess that's competition, and that's
Right.
how it works. But it can
So
be
there
kinda
could be
scary.
several changes in the next 3 or 4 months. I have been asked, and I'll just kind of tell you so that everyone hears it, I have been asked how are you planning for next year? And right now I'm planning just like we are this year. So keeping our class sizes smaller in case we have to have social distancing still. So we're still having sections of 15 or 16 kids. That's how we're budgeting for. We are looking at the different option for remote learning. That would be something that would change. If we're required to do that, we would look at the structure of how we would present that. Probably 5-12 first, and then we'd look at how we did the structure for K-4. But as of right now, we've been given no different guidance as far as beginning school next fall. So as we look at people moving and positions being open, I'm just planning to start the year like we're ending the year, because we have nothing else to go on. So I know that that kind of impacts the budget. You know, typically where we would have a 2-section grade, we have a 3-section grade, but we do have money, one-time money, CARES money that we can use to cover us for a year for things like that. But that number, you know, the amount we get is limited, so all the things that we say, oh, we can use CARES money for that, those add up pretty quickly, so.
But with the vaccinations coming about and with the numbers going down, we're not looking more towards kids being in school? I mean, more
I've gotten, no, so from the get-go, we follow the guidance from Iowa Public Health and the CDC and the governor's office, and we've been giving nothing different than what we have currently. So, and I've heard nothing of any kind of discussion about it even. Because typically you hear chatter about, you know, the governor's going to say this, or the Iowa Public Health is going to come out with this. So unless we get guidance from them that changes, and I'd like to think that we will as the vaccine becomes more readily available, but as of right now, we've got nothing.
So you're saying right now we have to act as everything's status quo going into the next
Correct.
year.
And right now is when we do all of our planning. That's the challenge. So where I would typically reduce a section, let's say a 4th grade, and have a section of 22, we're still going to have sections of 14 because we don't have any more guidance. So whereas I would maybe move somebody for early retirement options, I'm not doing that this year because I have no different guidance. And I can't plan for it to be different and then come August be told it's the same and not have to be ready for it.
It happened this year.
Well,
Yeah.
then that was not something
So
I
we're
want to do
looking for
again.
an exciting July and August.
I'd prefer not to do that again if we don't have to. And the way I look at it for things like that, for staffing, because we do have the CARES money for it, we're not going to be out anything. Our kids still need extra support, you know, from missing even last spring. They're going to need that next year as well. It's not like this year has fixed, you know, or everybody's right where they need to be. So I don't think that it's going to be something that'll be detrimental. It'll force some of our budget conversations, I think, in a different direction, but.
I think we need to characterize what you're saying on expecting next year to be just like we're finishing this year. That doesn't have to be cookie cutter though either. It's really, you know, we talked last week about next year, starting school year, getting our K through 4 kids back in school full time, all day on Fridays.
Yep.
You know, staffing wise, we can plan for that and
Right. Yeah, and we
be
did,
ready to help
Right.
them with the remote learning and stuff like that.
Right. I think if we were required to do remote learning and we did not change the structure of it, we couldn't do remote learning without changing the structure.
Yep.
Because I do think kids need to be here all day on Fridays. I just don't know how, they just have to be. And so that I see, I anticipate our calendar will change in the sense that we're here 5 days a week. Now there might be some changes to our high school schedule with the Fly Fridays. That might be something that we continue, but that to me is innovative, but it would have to look different for those days. So it might not be exactly structured like it is now, but there is potential for that to be something much greater than what it is now.
Yeah.
So yes, there would have to be changes to the schedule. I'm talking about some of those staffing changes. As far as I'm concerned, the calendar that you approved last year is the calendar that we'll use next year. We're back on hours. We're back on Friday PDs with no remote days. We're back to everything the same. The only thing that I would say hasn't really been decided about the calendar is snow days. I know that that's a question. Do we want to have remote days or virtual days for snow days? We are sending out a survey to our parents and our staff and our students to get feedback on our return to learn plan. And that's one of the specific questions. I've had emails from both groups. We love that you can do that remotely. Oh, kids, I hate that. Let's do it at the end of the year like we used to. So we just need to get feedback from a bigger audience than the handfuls that email me. So
I do think it's important that we continue to say on the high school Fly Fridays that was not a COVID response. That was a
Correct.
planned, innovative
Correct.
teaching tool that is a victim of COVID right now because everybody links it to COVID. Honestly, everybody in the district links that to COVID, and it's going to be a struggle to detach that, and there's going to be a strong communication issue
Right.
to get those two decoupled
Right.
within the community, I think. So I think we just got to be aware of that and probably have a plan to attack that if we're going to continue with it. So, did we finish Mr. Castor's principal
Yeah.
report?
That was a
We
lot.
did? Oh, we sure?
That was a lot.
All right. Well, we
You
can.
have a lot to say considering he wasn't here.
Yeah. Well, we can roll right into the superintendent report then.
So there's some really exciting things happening. I think I've mentioned, maybe for our new board members weren't here for this, but we have the opportunity to partner with a group called Rural Housing 360. And what that is it's a nonprofit, and they work with employers to find affordable housing in rural communities to attract workers. And so we're looking at it from a couple of different angles. We have several teachers that are living in Des Moines area or in the outskirts of the Des Moines area who come here and they drive, they commute, because there isn't an abundance of housing available in our communities. And so this group meets with any prospective employee that wants to maybe venture down this path, and we'll actually work with financing, work with the U.S. Department of Agriculture about low interest, no interest loans for extended years. I think some of them are 30 years. You have to meet certain requirements, but they actually do a lot of legwork on some of the federal programming that has funding available for mortgages and kind of getting started. And then they also have some contact with the communities in terms of if there are lots that are available that houses can be put on, or if there are lots available for for sale, they could work with the city. Obviously, a tax base is the benefit for the city. And they have an architect, I think, on staff that designs kind of what would fit, that's all within code. They have, you don't have to use any of their services. They don't sell anything. They just connect the people so that the housing might be an option. And so so that's one aspect of it. So we could hopefully get some of our teachers to find affordable housing in our communities, which would be a benefit. But then the other part of that is connecting with the group so that our students have the opportunity to go in when they're doing the electrical work and work with a licensed electrician and see what that looks like for our building and trades group. To put up a garage on one of the houses so that they can see the construction. I know that some schools do a whole house project, where they build a whole house. We just don't have the manpower for something like that. So if we can do a porch or a deck or, some of those things that you see as the project is happening, then we want to make that experience, that real world experience, available for our students. So that's the other kind of really great piece of that. So we have Steve Gilbert coming in tomorrow to talk to 4 or 5 of our staff members who are interested in hearing more about it. So I'm excited about the possibility of that. He said that when they started with, I want to say 5 houses about 3 years ago, and they're probably going to put in about 50 this year. So it's exciting, yeah.
Are they local or are they nationwide? What are they?
They're pretty Midwestern right now. He's excited because they live in the area. The company actually has a spec home. Their office is in Martinsdale. So you can, I don't know if I think it's now sold and somebody actually lives in the home, but you could have toured. That's where I went and toured the home there. But he's pretty excited about just having to drive 5 minutes or 10 minutes to get here instead of going for a couple hours. So that's Rural Housing 360, and I'll give you some more updates when we get them. We did submit our FEMA grant and got word that it was being sent. It was approved at the state level and was being sent to the federal level. Correct, Mr. Bauer?
Yeah, and that was back in December. So it's taken them quite a while to process it.
Right, so we should hear on that. I just wanted to give you an update because we talked about that, and it was about $24,000 that we submitted for.
27.
27, and that was the immediate response to the pandemic, the COVID pandemic in the spring. The current quarantine and remote learner numbers, I did put a trend chart on there for you, so you can see what that looks like. The top graph is the number of quarantined students. As you can see, back on November 10th, we had about 93 students quarantined, and that's when we came to you with the mask mandate request, and since then, our numbers have been, there were a couple of weeks when we had 0, and then we saw a little spike after we got back from Christmas, but now we're starting to go down again, and we're averaging about 10 to 15 students quarantined. Now, when it's quarantine, that also includes kids who test positive. So most of our test positive numbers are less than 6, so we don't report the number, but they're all included in that quarantine number, so that's why I provided that for you. And then the other number I sent was our remote learners. This was a little bit more challenging because the numbers are fluid. You can take your student out to remote learn at any time, but they can only come back at certain times during the year. So if you've got, let's say, grandma moves in and you have to, now she's got underlying health conditions, you can pull your students out, but they can't come back until we have a quarter break or a midterm break. So obviously for our teachers, so we don't have kids in and out, in and out, in and out.
Is there like a minimum time period for that? Like, how do you differentiate between a child that's that's moving to remote learning or a child that's leaving for 2 weeks to go to Texas to visit family?
Right now, no.
So it's all remote learning, no matter what? Or
it doesn't include our quarantine kids.
No, I guess in the coming back part of it.
Yeah, they only can come back on those certain days. So if you let's say that I'm going to go see family in Texas,
Yep.
And I pull my student out this week, if they can't come back until the next quarter break. Now, if that's next week, they can come back next week. But if it's not, then they have to wait 6 weeks until they can come back.
That's only though if they say they're going to be a remote learner. They could just call in and tell us they're.
And then they're absent.
And they could,
Yeah, then they're absent.
So if I called you and said I'm taking my kids for 2 weeks to Texas, I could do that and bring them back the day I get back, right?
Right, but then they're considered absent. Whereas if they're remote learning, they're not absent.
But they get the same amount of learning, right?
Yeah, in theory, yeah.
The same virtual learning.
Yeah, same virtual learning, if they choose to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah. So you can see kind of how our numbers fluctuate frequently for lots of different reasons.
I had a quick question. You said, that the spike in the quarantine from the start of that graph was really when we instituted the masks. And I think that follows kind of the trend in Iowa too, where it went down. Are you compliance with masks with students? I know that was an issue when we first kind of ratcheted everything up. Is it kind of normalized now, do we feel? Or, are you still, is it still a constant struggle, or?
No.
No.
I would say it's much more. I think our students are wearing masks without concern.
Okay.
We have a few.
Yeah.
But we expect that.
We have a few for anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions about those quarantine numbers or the trend line for remote learners? Also, last board meeting in February, we talked a little bit about our FAST scores, and we didn't have them all in. I think we have, I want to say, and I'll double check, we have one second grader who is not finished yet. So that's why it's still saying missing data for that one grade level. But those have all been updated with our current students in our current testing for the winter. So that's all in there. And then I also made available our other test that we've started in our elementary, and that's called the iReady. That's a math assessment that our teachers use, and that data is included. The information about that is just under the iReady PDF of the board packet. I think some of the things that you can see in this that are really encouraging, if you look at second grade, for example, the number of students who tested diagnostic 1, that would have been the first week or two of school, the number of kids that were over the grade level, meaning mid or above the grade, so already 4 months into the year, was 4%. And we had 4% that were what we call on grade level. So we had 8% total. Currently we have 25%. So between fall and spring, or fall and winter, we've had an increase in that to 16. The number of kids that were on the other end of the spectrum, meeting 2 grade levels or below, was at 33% in the fall, and it's at 6% now. So we're seeing some really and that was just an example from second grade. That's really remarkable growth for our kids. Now, are we, I think Roger had asked the question, does this fall in line with where you expect to be? To be quite honest, I don't know what to expect. I mean, this year, I honestly don't know what to tell you as far as data. Are we trending in a direction that's showing our kids are making growth? Yes. And we're seeing some exponential growth in some of our students. And I don't know how much of that is because we missed 3 months. I don't know how much of that is because of some of the new implementation things that we're doing. I don't have a marker for what that needs to look like. But when I look at this and I look at trend line from other years, I would say we're doing very well. Still not where we want to be, but I think that we're seeing not the same level of growth, but close to the same level of growth, even though we had those 3 months where kids didn't have to learn. They could choose to do it voluntary. So next year obviously will tell us more, but this year I think that Natasha Cooper, who does our data for the curriculum work, is extremely pleased with what we're seeing number-wise. But again, how does that compare? I have no idea. Because obviously we've never done this before.
Was the second grader, or for example, the second grade had one line and then a bottom line underneath it, that was for the previous year?
No, it was for the fall.
For the fall.
Yeah, so they've made that much grow between the fall and the winter.
And we've made improvements in our math curriculum,
yes,
right, to align more with how the tests are being taken.
Correct.
That in itself is a big step in the right direction,
correct,
right?
Right, and so that's one of the things that I wanted to point out. So this iReady is a diagnostic / screener is what they call it. When you look at the FAST assessment that I provided, the FAST scores, I think it's important to note, because if you look at those math scores, let's say you look at the math cap, so that would be our middle school test results. You see we're at 40% proficient. That's deceiving, because that test is based on grade level benchmarks. So really that test should be done in the fall and in the spring. Yeah. Because that's what they're learning at 5th grade level or at 6th. So we wouldn't expect them to be proficient midway through the year on 5th grade material. We would expect them to be proficient at the end of the year. But because we don't have any other test right now for that, we did give it to them in the winter. But that's a benchmark assessment. So that looks at standards for that grade level.
So you don't really have any, if you're giving it to them in the winter, we're expecting a lower score because they don't have all the information. When we give it to them, do we have a baseline expectation of what number they should be
for
at?
that? No. And that's one of the reasons, and I think Heather is part of that conversation. Our math team is really digging into what assessments we have that are available that can give us that mid-year data, because this doesn't do it.
Right.
But this is the only thing we have right now. So what does that look like? And we've got, I think, some direction But it's, again, how to balance that with everything else teachers are doing right now, and just finding that balance.
Thank you.
But I thought it was important to note that because it's not representative of a skill level, it's representative of the benchmarks for that whole grade level. So,
I'll just ask, so what value does the test give you if you don't have any benchmark or baseline to really compare it to? What information are you able to get out of it? Or is it worth to giving them that assessment?
for the math cap, so we're required
Okay.
to give an assessment.
Mhm.
This is the one we use for benchmark. So in any normal year, you could look and see how your curriculum is aligned. So if we get to the end of the year and we're at 60% in one class, 80%, 85%, then we know that the curriculum is aligned in the 80%, but there's something that's not being taught instructionally in the class that's
Okay.
at 60%. So it gives us a look at our curriculum, but not necessarily student individual skills. If that makes sense. I mean, we can break it down to student levels, but that's more, when you look at a benchmark assessment, you're looking more at what is your curriculum, how is that structured, are all the things that should be taught during that year being taught and mastered by students. And then you look for gaps, you look for holes, you look for where those discrepancies are. But it's not like a screener where you're looking at very specific skills that students have that you can build on or give intervention for. So it's just a different kind of an assessment. So
And this was done when?
the winter, it was done in January.
So then in the spring, you'll have another one?
Yep, usually in May. Yeah.
And the nice thing is you have previous year's results, so you can benchmark yourself off previous
Correct.
year's results.
Correct.
But again, with this year being so funky, you're not going to have good,
Right.
you know.
Right. So if you look at last year, I mean, you can look, last year our winter results in math were at 43%. This year they're at 40%.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not like we're that far off. We didn't take it in the spring,
Yeah.
so we have a blank there.
Right.
So that's why I said when we met in February, earlier this month, there are just so many gaps with this that it's really hard to say this is working, this isn't working, but at least it gives us an idea of conversations to have.
Will we be able to identify if the remote students are at the same levels? It will be.
Yeah.
So then, do we send that
Because they
data?
take the test as well.
Do we send that data up to the, schools or high school associations or something? Like
No.
to the, no?
They don't ask for it.
Wouldn't that be a novel idea?
Yeah, wouldn't that be
to-
interesting?
To aggregate the data
Yeah.
to see if remote is better?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Because that's essentially what they were doing with COVID-19, right? We had to send all our results up to the.
We still do.
Right, so that they could use that data, and we
Right.
don't even use this data on a statewide level.
They'll evaluate it, but we don't have to identify who was remote in these tests. They just go up as fourth grade.
Interesting.
are we doing any evaluation internally on remote versus in person? We are?
Yep.
So that if a parent says, well, is my kid, should I send my kid remote or not? We're gonna have
Yeah.
statistics to say, well, this
Yes.
is the option, these are the.
And I think the challenge with that is so many things go into that remote. that,
Right.
What's your structure like at
Three
home?
different kids.
Is your kid able to learn by themselves in a corner? Is
Well,
it, there's so many
I
things that are
just-
unique about that.
It's a smaller sample size too
Yes.
per
Yeah.
grade.
Yes, it is.
Because we're down to what, like 60 remote learners now? I mean, that's
Yeah.
less than
Some
10
grades
per
have
grade.
one
That's like
remote learner.
5 kids per grade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
The last thing, good news, we wrote Casey's grant and we're awarded $20,000.
All right.
So yeah, we are using that for our family consumer science. I don't think pizza oven is on the list anymore. They'd asked if we could get a panini press instead, and I said, you know what, you guys make what you make. I don't care what it is. But a grill and some baking supplies, and then we have some things for our middle school students during their open campus time at the beginning of the day, some engineering and architectural things. I don't know what augmented reality is, but apparently it's some kind of gaming thing where kids can...
It's more than a
Maybe
gaming
that's
thing.
2021.
It's-
Augmented reality.
Yeah.
We use
We don't need to.
Yeah, we don't need this. This isn't virtual, folks.
Yeah.
we use it for electrical engineering design, augmented
Okay.
reality. It's
Okay, so
everybody will
that's
know what it is soon. I know
That's
it's coming.
that grant.
Yes, we didn't know what that was.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's right.
And then we also got
If
some...
we get some, it sounds like we know somebody who can come in and help.
Yeah.
I didn't say I know how to use it. I know my company's has it. I'm not the tech guy.
Well, you
that's
know
for sure.
someone.
Yeah.
I know a guy.
And then we also got some universal equipment for remote learning. So some of our classrooms weren't outfitted to do all the maybe screencasting. And so if teachers had asked for that, we have money in that grant for that as well. So that was a great award for that $20,000 for those purposes.
So it's entirely spent then,
Mhm.
the 20?
Yeah, because we write it for what we're doing. And, just a, kind of an FYI, because I talked to you a little bit about the childhood, the daycare grant, and we were supposed to find out on Friday, and I got an email on Friday that says, good news. It didn't say you were awarded your grant, but it did say that they had partnered with, so this was Iowa Workforce Development, they had partnered with DHS, and DHS has a grant that's available that does not require a match. And so what we did is we wrote the grant, if you remember, to take what we call the beauty wall, the snow fence off the roof, and fix the roof, and then to expand the daycare option into more classrooms so that we can have more targeted learning for different age groups of kids, and then also expand who we have here for the summer. So that total was going to be $88,000, I believe. And so we had to have a match for that, which we did. We can use school funding for that, so $44,000. The new award that they told us about on Friday was we could apply for the DHS grant, that didn't have a match. So all of the things that we put in there fit into the criteria for the DHS grant. So I sent an email today and just said, so can the DHS grant be our matching grant? So can we get $44,000 from you? And can we get $44,000 from DHS? I haven't heard back from her, but the way that it reads, I think that that's probably how we'll approach it. It doesn't hinder our workforce development grant if we apply for the DHS grant and are awarded it. They don't care where the match comes from. And so because it fits in all their criteria, we're gonna try for both. So hopefully we'll hear about that sometime in March. I think they said maybe around the 20th.
Back to the Casey's grant real quick. Was that written kind of with, I can't remember when it was. Was it this summer when we talked about the grant writing?
This is a member of that grant writing team. Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good progress there.
And does Casey's ever wonder what was spent on, or they know, or they get
We
pictures,
send
or-
them a very detailed
Good.
reason of what we want and why we want it. And
Good.
yeah, I said we should even create a video with the Casey's cup in it, but we'll let our kids do that.
That's right.
That's all I have.
All right.
I just had a quick question. I know you said there'll be that survey going out. Do we have an idea of when that'll go out for?
Yeah, the district leadership team met last week, I think, and started to construct that. Carla Day from the AEA does a phenomenal job with that. So we have an outline of a lot of the questions we want to ask, and we're going to work with her to come up with the structure. So my target date is April 1st. I'm afraid if we send it out before or during spring break, it'll get lost in the shuffle. So if we send it out in April when we're not really doing hopefully much else, we'll get a better response.
All right, we will move on to the consent agenda, the consent items. For discussion, We have past meeting minutes that was in your packet, monthly bills and financial statement, which was in your packet. We did have some open enrollments both in and out, and the deadline is in between this meeting and the next meeting, correct?
Correct.
Isn't it March 15th?
Yes,
March 1st.
March 1st.
March 1st.
Yeah.
Okay. So this may be the last.
Except for kindergarten. Kindergarten has until September 15th,
Okay.
September 1st.
September 1st.
Yep.
Okay. Then we've got a load of hires and resignations. We got Chris Allen hired as a classroom associate. Nathan McKinney hired as a substitute bus driver. Libby Hanier resigns as assistant softball coach. Libby Hanier is hired as the head softball coach. Heather Dutchery, .5 administrative contract extended for 2021-2022. And Alex Nissen-Pickard internally transfers to second grade position. Any discussion on these items?
I'd like to, I don't know if I need to make a motion, but the number 5 with Heather Dutchery, let me just say it's no reflection on you, Heather, whatsoever. It's just about the contract, the position itself. So I feel like there needs to be more discussion in that area,
Yeah.
and I'd like to pull it out of the consent item and bring it down to the items for discussion, or maybe even table it for the next discussion. But I think there's a lot. I have questions on it, and I think it needs to go through more of a thought process than just a general consent matter. So I don't know if I need to formally put that into a motion.
Can we discuss it? Just.
Well, is this?
You can do it either way.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, I would say pull it out, so approve all of them except that, with the removal of that, and then we can have the conversation about it. If you want to table it after the conversation, you can.
Okay,
makes
I'd like
sense.
to pull that piece out then.
So you would make the motion to approve
To
everything
approve
with the
everything
exception
else.
of,
Yes.
Yep.
With the exception of number 5.
Is that your motion?
That is my motion.
Do we have a second?
I would second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, the consent items have passed. So do we discuss that as the first? Can we put that as the first item under the items for discussion then? The one we moved down? Yep. Okay. So we will open discussion on the administrative contract extension for school year 2021-2022 for the administrative contract.
So, a question I had, this halftime contract, I mean, it's funded through the CARES money. Is it required for this position, or can it be used, can that money be used elsewhere?
Yes, but limited. It's in our general fund, but it can only be used for certain things, and it's only one-time money. So obviously, it's not going to come back every year. So it can be used for, I mean, believe it or not, air conditioning, ventilation. It can be used for cleaning. It can be used for extra staff. It can be used for anything to, I want to say combat, maybe that's not the best word, combat the pandemic. And so that's the guidance we have. So if we had to add janitorial staff, we could use that to pay for the janitorial staff through the pandemic, through what we consider the need for that.
Can you remind me kind of the logic of how we decided to do this instead of the other things on the table, I guess, that are approved?
What do you
Just
mean?
instead of saying allocated to AC, ventilation,
Right.
how did we, and how did we land on this staffing adjustment rather than other staffing adjustments?
Right, so primarily two things I would say. pushed this probably in front of some of the others. Relationships between home and students and behaviors as a result of some of the challenges with just the conditions of the year, and support for teachers are the two driving factors why this was a position that was created. We know that we still monitor kids for mental health issues. We still talk to teachers to see how they're doing, and just having that extra person to be a go-between between teachers and parents with things like the mask mandates and things like remote learning, and just having that extra person is we felt a good place to put money for the relationship piece for not only our students but also our staff. So that's why that went above some of the other things. Now, this is not the only thing that we'll use that money for, but it is one of the considerations that I thought was important. What is our allocation for the second CARES? We've spent the first 232,000. So, but it's not.
There's lots of uses, and it can go for a year or so.
Yeah, you
or
don't
2
have to
years.
use it within a certain amount of time, but if you have, so we had CARES money from the first act that happened right when it came out. We got, I think, 48, what was that? I'm telling you the wrong number, but it's somewhere around $50,000.
Yeah, about $50,000, right.
But we had to expend all of that before we could start using this.
And we've not used any of this yet.
Yeah, we haven't used any of this,
drawn down any.
230 yet.
And this is in the general fund?
It's reimbursed, so we submit the claim for
Yeah.
reimbursement. It isn't
So we
like
had
they
to put it
send
in
you the money.
the categories would qualify.
They didn't write us a check yet.
Right,
No.
not like they did the
No.
first time.
So earlier you were discussing the CARES money and how we got to be careful and understand how we're spending it. We can't just spend it anyway. Do you have a comprehensive plan on here's how we want to attack? Here's how we really want to spend this $232,000?
We have a pretty good idea.
Okay.
Having a second section or a third section in one of the grades, that teacher's salary we can be added to this. The position, the 0.5 position for administrative, doing an extra section of our air conditioning is on, and possibly two, depending on this grant that we have applied for. And then things like supplies, masks that we have bought to make sure kids have a mask when they're here, additional cleaning supplies, all of those things that go into.
Hotspots, would you use those?
Hotspots, we've ordered 10 new hotspots for additional access for families that don't have reliable service at home. Yep.
Okay, yep.
Yep, so those contracts for a year. Yep.
So being that it's an administrative contract, then does it add on additional expenses such as
We just put
benefits and such?
No, we
for
just put a stipend with it. So it's a continuation of the contract that we approved, which did not include the additional benefits, just the stipend.
Okay.
So it would be a $16,000 stipend for the year.
Is there any, so I guess my question would be, a lot of the extra burden that's been expressed to us on teachers is really revolves around remote learning and supporting virtual learners. Is there any of this CARES Act money that we're really using to attack that specific problem, whether it be, is it a specific extra position we bring in to support virtual learners at one of these levels or anything like that? I mean, I don't know what has really been discussed and how you've kicked it around. I know this isn't the first time you've thought about it by any means.
Right.
But
I would say for this year, no, simply because we didn't get the funding
Right.
until January, or were notified and then the amount we got early January, mid-January. So for this year, no, we had not planned on that, so we did not have a position. I think when we look at our option of whether or not or how we're going to do remote learning, if we do that, that will be a consideration. But again, it's only one year. You know, it's only one-time money. So it's not like I can create a position that's going to be long-term. So if we decide that we want to do remote learning, then we need to know how that's going to happen in our general budget, knowing that this money isn't going to be there beyond this year. Now, we can use it for a year, but we'd have to plan to make it so that it's self-sustaining beyond this year.
Ongoing funding.
Yeah, so that's where that challenge kind of comes in, with not knowing what we're going to be asked to do for next year. That's why I'm kind of stuck. So we don't want to spend all of it, because we might have to come up with a remote learning person in the fall for a year if we're asked to do that,
Right.
which I don't know yet. So
Right.
we don't want to expend all of the money from that 240 or 230, whatever the number is, until we get a little bit more clarity on what we're going to be asked to do next year.
So we do have some flexibility to be able to respond to
Yes,
something like that?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay, that's good.
This isn't taking up the whole budget is what.
Right,
I think
right.
it's very helpful for me to provide context
For
that we
sure.
still have some ammo.
Yes.
Yeah, those numbers, I hadn't heard those numbers before. That definitely helps me process this significantly, yeah.
So for, say, someone who has not been following a board discussion and whatnot, how do you, I guess, label this? Is this basically a middle school?
It's an assistant
Principal?
secondary principal. So Steve Castor still has oversight over the whole 512 program. And this position, this assistant principal position, primarily works in middle school, but if the need is anywhere, they go anywhere. Just like if Steve is needed in the middle school, he'll go to the middle school.
I guess I'm just not sure how, I understand what we're trying to do is obviously trying to work through the rest of the year, into next year, and taking into consideration all these challenges that we're still faced with. But we're still having to get past the hurdle of the perception of, and yet another layer of administration. That's how I can see the public perception out there is, you know, why don't we use that money towards making it, whether if it's legitimately needing someone to steer the remote part of it, the remote learning part of it, like we talked about before, whether it's through Ingenuity or whomever it is, instead of making yet another layer of administration. That's the struggle that I am seeing from a perception standpoint.
Gotcha. But I think correct me if I'm wrong, some of your duties, Heather, are to be kind of that remote person. I mean, I guess maybe, no, that was with masks, never mind. That was, yeah.
But there was some of the homeschool back and forth.
Yeah,
too.
some of the facilitation of communication between the teachers and the students and.
I contact families every day. That's what you're.
Yeah, I guess.
I think Sharon's right. I think that this position, whoever it is, whether it's me or someone else even, I think that they're able to support teachers like you're talking about, because although Steve is definitely a good support 512 for teachers and students, if you think about there's 600 5th through 12th graders, him trying to build a relationship with all 600 of them versus 300 of them is just going to make those relationships that he does have with the 300 and this person has with the other 300 even better, so that we can support our kids and teachers, I think.
But I guess the argument, and again, it's no reflection on you,
No, I
I'm just talking about the
understand.
position itself. But the argument's going to come back to, well, I mean, how long has we been going through with just a secondary principal and an elementary principal, and then now it seems like perfect timing to add in this assistant principal because it's convenient. And I'm not saying that that's what we're trying to do. I'm just saying, again, the perception of yet another layer of administration, is that necessary? And is this the time to do it? When we're just fueling the flame right now to have it come back, and people would easily be able to say, well, you're just taking advantage of the situation and making, throwing this position in there because of what's going on.
I think it's a temporary contract, though. I mean, so once, yeah.
So, I mean, okay,
Yeah.
so say you put in the assistant principal position. It is you're saying it's a temporary contract, so then next year you're gonna do away with the assistant principal?
I would imagine
For-
That's the recommendation.
Well, maybe title it differently. I mean, for a principal, I just see that as so permanent.
permanent.
I mean, it's just like saying, okay, we have a CFO today, next year you're not gonna have a CFO. I mean, with the structure of a school, you know, you have the superintendent, you have the principals, you have the teachers. That just falls in line with the structure of a school. So maybe have a different title to it, maybe facilitator or whatnot, but then it just takes the way it's, if we're going down that road, it just seems like it's not temporary, it is permanent.
Because of some of the things that we're asking that position to do we have to have it as a principal position title? I mean, I don't know with administrative.
Because of the person we hired who had the administrative license, we of course maximized that.
Okay,
So we did
okay.
say, yes, you can evaluate. You can, I mean, because you have the capacity to do that. Would they have to have it? No, because you can have a dean of students, similar kind of position, right? That doesn't necessarily need an administrative license. So we could, I mean, I think that's my recommendation is for a year. It's not, and I've made that very clear to Heather, that this is not beyond next year as I see it. And if the board doesn't approve it, it's not beyond this year. And I think we've been upfront about that from the beginning. I just think that and I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball, but I don't think the challenges are gonna go away in the fall that some of our families are facing and some of the things that we're still dealing with as a result of this. I'd like to think that a lot of them will, but I just don't see that. And I know I've had several, and not that this is the driving factor, obviously, but it is a consideration. I've had several teachers thank me for that extra support this year because it has been a godsend not to have to be the one that not only is dealing with all this in the classroom, but then also dealing with all the discipline and things and the behaviors going home, and having somebody to do that has been extremely beneficial. So I've made no promises. I said this is a 1-year extension. That's all I'm recommending. I talked to her about it when I said I was going to put it on there. I said it might go through, it might not. I mean, I've been very upfront from the beginning. And if I look at what does this position bring us and that relationship piece with our kids and with our teachers, I see that as a value add. So that's the recommendation.
Where did the title Dean of Students go? I mean, who is that still in
I
it?
think that was Rose,
It was Rose.
and then she got shared,
Yep.
so she wasn't here consistently. And now she's back, but she's got a lot on her plate with our at-risk as a result of COVID. So it's...
But is that title gone?
Yes.
Yeah, that title's
That
gone.
title's gone.
Now
She's just a social worker, not just a social
Yeah, I was
worker.
gonna say.
Just,
Yeah,
My
you
wife
know what
is
I
just
meant.
a housewife.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, Rose.
No, no,
That's
no,
what
no,
you
no.
said.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just throwing this out, but would that title be more appropriate for this position?
It's the same thing. I mean, it's the same job, except for the
To
dean of
me-
students
to me,
doesn't.
It's public perception. To me,
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave this meeting and then, you know what, tomorrow we're gonna have people call and say, hey, you guys just hired another assistant principal. How'd that happen? Why did you guys do that? As opposed to dean of students, it doesn't, I'm not saying that it is a very important job, but it doesn't tag to the point of being so permanent.
An administrator.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. Does it carry some weight? Does it carry some weight when she calls home and says, "I'm the assistant super or the assistant secondary principal rather than the dean of students? Because dean of students is also elementary too, and she only deals with 5 to 12 mainly, is that right?
If
Dean of high school students?
if anybody
I mean,
from
I-
the school calls my home, they carry weight.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's right. So I don't.
I guess I'll just say that, my thoughts around this were a concern about perception, especially, and both parents and teachers, I think there's some teachers that definitely have a perception of adding more layers above us instead of giving us the support, and I'm very aware of that. But understanding more about the CARES Act, what this position really is, what it's costing us, has really helped me with the clarity around it. So, and I think it's important that we put that out there on the record, that this is a one-year contract, one-year record, and it is really still in a response to supporting the students and the teachers through this period of COVID.
Through the pandemic.
Just, being that clear about it. So, any more?
I'm glad we pulled it out for the discussion. I thought it was a very good discussion.
Absolutely.
Again, I'm not opposed to it. I understand what it's doing. I think it's important. I just want us to be cautious on the perception of it and how it comes about, and make sure that we are very crystal clear.
And Ted can have it in the notes, right? That is a one-year contract, and just to be very clear.
Any more comments, discussion?
And I'll throw it out there just because Cindy brought it up. I mean, we can call it whatever you want to call it. I think the challenge is, I think Dean of Students relates just to working with students, whereas Assistant Principal relates to working with kind of that whole realm of possibilities, what we're asking them to do. So I wouldn't typically have a Dean of Students evaluating teachers, but I would have an Assistant Principal doing that. So I think that we have to, whatever we want to call it, I'm fine with that. And I would suppose, have our Dean of Students evaluating teachers, but that's typically not. As long as they have an evaluator license, they can do that. So I look at it from, if I've got somebody that's got a skill set and a license to do more, I'm of course going to have them do more, if possible, because that helps the whole program. So I'm not opposed to calling it something different, even if we call it, something related to the COVID. I don't know what it would be, but we could do that if you think that would be. I think the key point is it's a one-year extension of what it is now, and that's really all we're recommending. If you want to consider something else for a name, I'm not opposed to that. I just want to make sure that we're using the same terms, the same language.
And to be clear, when we approved this last time, and from then till now, it has been called an assistant principal.
Correct.
Is that correct, the position has?
Correct.
Okay. I would entertain a motion on this item.
I'll move to approve the half-time administrative contract for 2021-22 period.
And second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve the administrative contract extended for 2021 through 2022. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item is the final reading of Board Policy 502.12 that I do not have to read because we've already read it, correct?
Correct. No changes.
I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the final reading of Board Policy 502.12.
Second that.
It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries to approve the final reading of the Board Policy Series 502.12. Next item is the school calendar. that we previously discussed.
I hope this is the last one. Oh my gosh.
Does
We
anyone?
only got a few more meetings this school
Oh.
year, so there can't be too many more.
Yeah, that's right.
It's gotta be close.
I just have a question about that before we go to the motions. Is it common or uncommon to change from calendar days to hours or vice versa during the middle of the year?
It doesn't happen.
Okay. Is it all legal to do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure, I mean, if it doesn't
Yeah, I
happen,
did,
is it legal?
Right.
Yes,
Question.
no, I emailed.
I've never seen it.
No,
done
it's not,
before.
I can't ever remember it happening in the 20
Yeah.
years I've been in Iowa. I mean, I just have never seen it. I did talk to both Margaret Buckton, who works with the legislative group, and I talked to Danielle Hainfield, the attorney. And both said this is obviously unprecedented to have a bill go into effect in the middle of a school year about that school year calendar. And so both said, as long as you're following the DE guidance, which is what the recommendation is, then, and you have the public hearing, you know, you go through the process, then it's, yeah.
Okay. We're all going under together then.
Yeah.
Well, I don't like to look at it that way. I like to look at it as we're enacting what we're being asked to enact.
I think the nice thing about this, honestly, is we're giving the teachers 2 real professional development days where they're not having to worry about remote learners.
Yeah.
Right.
They can really hopefully focus on their own professional development, which is the purpose of those days.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's, I'm hoping that they missed that a little bit, and this will be a nice little change for them, even though it's just 2 days. So,
And I like the fact that we're already ahead of what we would need for the number of hours. So we're, you know, in good shape. We don't
Yep.
have to try to
and
look for ways to.
I had asked you previously about remote learning days, such as our snow days,
Mhm.
what hours those counted. You want to just address that real quick?
Yeah, I mean, really, and so this is, I just smile about this year when I'm asked questions like that,
Yeah.
because it's all different. I mean, and so a remote day is a day of instruction, so it's 6 hours or 6.5 hours of instruction, whatever you typically have for instruction, that's what it counts as. So, you know, I think that there is new legislation being proposed about budgets that is tied to in-person learning. So I don't remember which house it's in right now, but they're proposing additional one-time monies for school districts that started the year on April or August 23rd or whatever the start date was, and you get so much money per student for every day that you were in person. Again, the problem is one-time money, so it's not like we can use it for raises or, you know, some of those things, but I think they're recognizing that it did take more to have kids in session, more cleaning, more supplies, more of everything, but that's how they're counting those days. So if you were a hybrid or you had remote days, kids were in the building one day and out the next, they're saying if they were out for less than 3 hours, you could only count this much. I mean, it's kind of an interesting time, but right now it's a day of learning.
Okay. I'd entertain a motion on the school calendar recommended changes.
I would move to approve the recommended changes to the current academic school calendar.
And I'll second that.
We've got a move and a second to approve the recommended changes to the current academic school calendar. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is temporary COVID leave policy.
So this is the same thing that I brought last time. And that was obviously the first reading, so I'm asking you to approve it for the second reading and to suspend the final reading, because it's the same guidance that we had when we were working in the fall with the CARES, or I'm sorry, the COVID leave. So
Okay.
nothing has changed from what I recommended in.
Which allows staff to
Yes.
take the
Yes.
time as needed.
Yes.
Okay.
Any discussion or questions? Entertain a motion.
I meant to approve the COVID leave policy and suspend the final reading.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and second to approve the second reading of the COVID leave policy and suspend the final reading. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Facilities Committee update and long-range planning.
So this conversation has been a couple of different places, I think, in the last probably year or year and a half. It's become more readily apparent when working with Mrs. Boyd and Family Consumer Science, and also with Kristen Harris in daycare. When we were looking at this grant from Iowa Workforce Development, we were looking at other possible partners to either provide matching money or to look for additional money to extend the daycare or expand the daycare, possibly from birth to 3, because right now we're 3 and up. So how or what could we do with that? And so one of the things that we talked about, and I think well before I've been a member of this district, was, you know, should we have a standalone building that's specific for daycare purposes or early childhood? And one of the things that we came across was a grant that's a federal grant that's up to, you know, could be up to $500,000 for the construction of a facility, a daycare facility, to meet the needs of your community. Now, there are some things that go along with that, but in talking about that, one of the challenges we have is we have several things as a district. I mean, we've got a fantastic CTE building, we've got a great fine arts center, we've got up to date technology in a lot of instances. We're working on things like the air conditioning and the roof, all those things that normally take place. But we do have some pretty significant needs that we're going to have to address in the next probably 5 to 7 years. And some of them are going to be high ticket items, high dollar items that might, you know, we might need to do a bond. We might need to look at borrowing against or save and PEPAL. So they're just going to be things that I think the community needs to be aware of, be a part of, be, you know, in the planning, be in the conversation. And I don't think you can really start that too early. But I do think we need to have, so when back it up just a second, when looking at this grant, one of the things that all of the grants that are high dollar items want is, you know, what are the architectural plans? What is the building going to be? How much square feet is it? What is, you know, like what is it going to do? And so without having that, it's really hard to submit for some of these grants. And we can't submit for some of the grants to see if we can get the funding to pay for them without those pieces in place. And so what I'd like the board to approve is a subcommittee that's working on those long-range planning, including things like getting architectural sketches and renderings, looking at maybe a self-evaluation or a needs assessment of our athletic facilities. And, you know, we talk about the bleachers and we talk about the softball fields and the lighting and all of those things. We're going to have to start really getting to the nitty gritty of what that's going to look like, where things are going to be placed, how much money we're talking about, because if it's going to cost us $4 million to do all of this and we can write grants for $1 million of it, right? I mean, that's a win for our district, but we can't do any of that until we have a plan. And so I'm requesting that the board appoints a subcommittee to work on that plan, to start getting community input, to start having conversations to see if it's a need, to start to do some of the analysis, knowing that there is going to probably be money tied to it. And we can talk about what that looks like. I'd like that subcommittee to bring a plan for how they want to approach this, you know, given the guidelines of what we have to do. But there are things that I think we need to be very deliberate in and think beyond just, okay, we've got $300,000, we need to do air conditioning and roof, but we also have to be thinking about what are we going to do in 5 years especially knowing that we have some pretty high dollar ticket items that we have to take care of for safety reasons in that time or soon.
What would you anticipate be the makeup of this subcommittee?
So we have a facilities committee. I'd like to have members of that group. I'd like to get, have that group send out, requests for people who would consider being on it. I think that you guys have done that in the past with community members who have had an interest. So obviously it's not anybody can come. I think we have to be very strategic in our numbers. I don't, it's very hard to have a group of 50, but I think that group, a smaller group, can get information out, solicit feedback, start to talk to people about what's needed, what's wanted, not only what do we have to have, but what would be nice to have, and some of that. So I'd like that subcommittee to bring that as part of their plan.
So part of that makeup would be some staff or teachers.
Some coaches,
probably
parents.
somebody from the board here,
Yes.
I would assume.
Yes.
I mean, I know Cindy, you've been involved in the past in that and carry a little passion for it with you.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
the diversity of that I think is very important.
Right. Be nice to have a student or two on it, get somebody that's, a freshman that has an interest and would be willing to serve for a few years on that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Questions or discussions on?
I should also note that I'm recommending that this subcommittee be appointed until the project is completed, and then they would no longer be, it's not an ongoing committee assignment, it's just for the duration of the...
The facilities committee is the ongoing one.
Correct.
This subcommittee is
Correct.
a get it done and leave.
Right.
Or disband.
Right, and so because it's board appointed, then meetings are posted, they're open to public, which we want. I mean, we want everybody to be a part of the process. So it formalizes it a little bit, and I think gives a little bit of structure and commitment to it.
If no other discussion, I'd entertain a motion on this facilities committee, subcommittee.
I'd move to appoint a subcommittee on long-range facilities planning, including athletic facilities, family consumer science, science and daycare.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries to appoint the subcommittee to the facilities committee. Next item, bus bid. Another great deal because of the grant that was written last year, right?
Correct, yes. So we were awarded that, what they call Diesel Emissions Reduction Act grant, which is up to 35% of the cost of 2 buses, not to exceed $87,500. So in doing that, we had asked the company or the grant provider because we didn't know what our COVID costs were going to be this year, so we had just asked if we could buy a bus this year, which I think it's either been delivered or it's being...
It's still in Des Moines, I think.
Still in Des Moines, but it's closer than it ever has been.
It got delayed because of the fire.
Yes, yes. So that bus is, I think, almost to us. And then I'm asking that you approve the second bus, which we don't pay for until next school year, but we have to get the request in so that we can get it hopefully before school starts. I don't know if that's possible, but we won't get reimbursed until we have both of the buses and both of the engines have been destroyed. So that's when we'll get the $87,500. We have allocated transportation equity money to pay for these, which, as you guys know, was new within the last 3 years. So.
Good deal.
Is this bus pretty much identical to the bus we bought last year?
Yes. A year newer.
A year newer and more
I don't know if it's
expensive?
a year newer.
A year newer, more
You would think
expensive?
so. I didn't copy them all, but I have all of the specs if anybody is interested in that.
No. Does it have the
I
camera?
have them, but I did not print them for
Is it kind of
everyone.
yellowish and holds 57?
77.
77. Does it come with the camera system, which we're talking about next?
Nope, but we will put that on there before we get it. Just like the AED system that we'll put on there before we get it.
Okay.
I'd move to approve the bus bid.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the bus bid. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries to approve the bus bid. Next item is the bus camera quote.
So we evaluated our camera systems on the bus, and much to our dismay, we have 5 cameras that do not work. The hard drive does not record, and I don't know how much you know about bus camera systems, but they are on a cycle, so about every 10 days they record over themselves. And so I'm not going to say loosely installed, but they're installed in our buses that are on gravel all the time, that, the camera lenses get kind of filmy, but just the quality. I think these were installed, Robbie thought, over 8 years ago. And so we need to get them all working and to replace what we have versus just buy a new system, which would be more current, would only recycle itself once every month. There's just more storage on them now, a lot more clarity. So the recommendation is that we install. I did have a bid here for $53,471. We got our second quote today, which I put on your table. That is less, but we have to verify a number. So if you look, the Roscoe DV440 is a different camera system than the REI HD5. And so we're going to ask that Roscoe DV440 be turned to an REI system so that they're all the same, because we would have the same programming then for all of them. The Roscoe 440 was on our new van. That's what they were recommending for the new van, but we want it, and again, we have to talk to Mr. Tessel about that tomorrow. He was absent today. So that quote, we don't think it'll change much, but it might. But our second quote that we got today will be the quote. What I'm going to ask is that you approve whichever quote, once that change is made, is less. It's for the exact same system. It's for parts and labor. They're both the same quote, but whichever one is less, once we make that change, is what I'm going to ask you to approve. Can I do that, Ted?
That's not how we're gonna write it.
Because I don't have the exact name, but they have the 2 bids in front of them. I would say you could make a bid that will go with the Hoagland bus quote, if with changes is the lesser of the 2 bids. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll work through it to write it, so it makes sense.
Any discussion or questions on the bus camera system or the quotes?
I move to approve the purchase of the new cameras for the school transportation vehicles to go with Hoagland bus and changing Roscoe DV440 to an REI system, assuming they're still the lowest quote at that time.
Second.
Did you want to repeat that?
Second.
Second. It's been moved and seconded.
I don't know that I could.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the bus camera quote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries for the bus camera purchase. Next agenda item is certified staff handbook updates to internal transfers.
So the teachers and the administrators met in the Labor Management Committee. If you remember, internal transfers was one of the items that's not negotiable. any longer, so we moved it into the staff handbook, the certified staff handbook. The challenge that we were having as administrators was internal transfers could happen anytime, and there wasn't a whole lot of structure to it. Now, when you don't have many people that want to move, it's not a big deal, but last year we had a lot of movement. And not that we don't want teachers to be in positions where they think they're going to be a benefit, but we needed to put some parameters on that. And so we met with the Labor Management Committee, the teaching group of that committee, and the recommendation is listed there. And we're always going to try and accommodate or, have an internal transfer work if it makes sense, if it's a good fit, if it's, all of those things that we want for our kids. But we did put a timeline on it. We said we want the internal transfers to happen by the day that contracts are due, or May 15th, whichever happens first. And I think you guys probably can understand this, but if we have a second grade position open, we have a fourth grade teacher move into it. So now we have to post the fourth grade position for 5 days. Well, now we have a seventh grade teacher that wants to move into the fourth grade position. Now we have a seventh grade opening for 5 days. And so the problem is it just pushes down when we hire somebody to fill whatever our opening is. And so we wanted to put a little bit of structure to that. So this is the recommendation from the Labor Management Committee around that issue. I will say that on May 15th, a teacher could submit a letter that says, if there is a position open at this grade level in the summer, I would like to be considered for it. And if it's something that we think we can hire, we would probably grant that even after the May 15th date, but it's not a guarantee.
But before that, there were no parameters around the transfer?
Yeah, very, very loose. One of the things I guess I should add, because I'll just kind of go through them. Having a standard teaching license, if you're new to the district and you're a new teacher, you're on a conditional license for 2 years. And so the challenge was we would have somebody that would come in after their first year and want to move. Well, it's really hard to evaluate a teacher on effectiveness if they're moving to a new job after 1 year. So we're saying you have to be in that position for 2 years, or you have to have a standard license before you can move. And so we're talking, the other thing is and it happens everywhere, so not just here. We might have somebody that applies and gets a job in special education and is there for a year, and then something else opens and they move. And so it leaves a hard to fill spot open. So we're saying that you have to be in the district for 2 years as well. So if you're hired as a special education teacher, you're hired for 2 years as a special education teacher. Now, if we need to move you, right, not a voluntary transfer, an involuntary transfer, then we still can do that if it's in the best interest of the district. But we want to recognize our teachers and the value they bring and their passions, but we also want to try and create some stability in some of these programs so that we can make sure our kids are supported, our teams are supported. So that's why we're making the recommendations.
So a new teacher, they have a conditional license, and then what, after 2 years, then they obtain a standard license?
They apply for a standard license. They have to go through a mentoring program, which we provide here for 2 years. Heather actually does that. And so then they can apply for or if there's something that's not satisfactory, maybe one of the standards we don't feel comfortable yet, we can give them a 1 year extension for that initial license, but then they would be on a standard license after that.
Does the same concept apply to the course of study? Like, say a teacher has not done science before, they've done it for only 1 year, and then they want to switch to math.
If they have the license, then so they'd have to be licensed.
The standard.
In the content.
Okay.
It's secondary, it's content typically.
Okay.
So I have a 512 English, I can only teach English. I have a 512 social sciences, I can teach those, I can't teach math. If I wanted to teach math, I can get the required courses and then I could apply for a license. There's nothing that says I have to do that for 2 years, though, I think is what your question is.
Right.
If I have a standard license and I add to my endorsement, there's no
Gotcha.
There's no 2-year time.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussions on the certified staff handbook? I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the updates to the internal transfers in the staff handbook.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the updates to the internal transfers in the staff handbook. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That is the end of the agenda. We do have a work session with Representative Fry on Thursday, February 25th at noon, which is a virtual meeting. If any public wants to attend, they can contact the district office for details if to be able to Zoom in or whatever virtual format we're using. Next regular board meeting will be Monday, March 22nd at 6 p.m. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I didn't hear anything.
Second.
I'm done.
Still waiting for the second?
I'm still waiting for the second. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Adjourn.
You hear about that California school board that got caught on?
I can't hear about that.
What a mess. The California school board that got caught on,
Oh, like,
open and they were cussing their constituents. It's like, oh buddy.
Yes, the camera is still on.
Yeah.
Everybody on their best behavior. Everybody on their best behavior.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
It's nice to have company.
I think I already said that.